All right, we're live. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Welcome to Conversations with Belle, a web series that encourages personal growth and development by discussing life issues in a meaningful way. Today, I am so excited to have with us Dr. Dennis Parker, here
Hey,
to discuss his new book, Unrestricted. Can you see it? Can you see
yeah.
it? A
Hey,
Poetic
Bill.
Guide to Evolutionary Love. It is a book of poetry and prose. Welcome, Dr. Dennis.
Hey, Bill. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so
Thank
excited
you.
to hear what you have to say
Thank you.
on today. What inspired you to write this book in this format?
So, as I've said before, my daughter was my primary inspiration. I started about 6 to 7 years ago trying to write something about love because I didn't want her to get played. Growing up
Hmm.
as a man, you've seen a lot of things. You maybe
Yeah,
even participated in some things, and I just was like, you know what, I don't want to turn her out to the streets without any guide. So
right.
at first I started off as it was more like an intellectual endeavor. And I started doing research and then I was like, she will never read this. You know what I mean? I got like 20 to 30 pages in
Yeah.
doing theoretical underpinnings and just came to the conclusion that she's not gonna read this. And
Okay.
just through God's grace, man, I just started putting pen to paper or texting myself and text just different thoughts and God just allowed me to use poetry, which is incredible for me because I never placed any value in poetry outside of rap before this moment. So
Okay. So you're rapper Dennis.
I'm a rapper,
Rapper
a,
Dr.
a
Dennis.
rapper. Yeah, right, yeah, yeah, yeah. No. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
I supported rappers,
Okay.
but I didn't
Okay.
have it. I didn't stand behind and grab any mic or anything like that.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. How long have you been writing poetry? And I guess my question is, how did you decide to use that format? Because there's a series of
Yeah,
poems in there. Like, what made you decide to do that versus
yeah, yeah. So
a regular book?
when I did my first book, Bill, it was after I was writing my dissertation. And so when I was writing my dissertation, it's a technical structural way that you have to put things together. And to do it, it would wind me up very tight. And so at the end of 2 hours of writing, I would spend about 20 minutes just jotting my thoughts down. And that was the first book,
Hmm.
Motivating Male to Be Men. And it was more of a release valve. I'm gonna be honest, Bill. I can't tell you how or why poetry became the font for the creation of this book.
Hmm.
I know that all I did was just follow the things that were on my heart. Like I would see different things. I would have conversations with people, things that had happened over the years, over some 30 some years, and just different thoughts would trigger different emotions. And some of the poems rhyme, and then some of them are like you said, more prose, where you just the stories, short stories. But for the most part, it just was something that was on my heart, and
Okay.
I just picked up with it and just ran with the ball.
Okay. What was the conversation with your daughter like after she read your words? Like, what was her reaction, her response?
It
How
was
did she?
incredible. Yeah, it was incredible. Great question, Bill. She, I gave it to her on a Sunday, right? Later that evening, she called me. and was like, "Bruh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, well, let's talk. I want you to read it. She's like, you wrote this for me, man. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah, 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 yeah. But I said in the process, I ended up writing it for me. You know what I mean? So she would read different pages, and every night, for a week, she would call me and say, "Who is this?" I'm like, "Dave, the purpose of writing poetry is to help people to remain anonymous. You know what I mean? Or to, what were you thinking here?" And we
Mhm.
spent some time talking about that. Um, what do you want me to get out of this poem?
Mhm.
Things of that nature. And then on the last night, which was like that Saturday, so she read it in 7 days. She called me. She said, "Okay, I've now read the book. It's filled with up and down, good and bad, and highs and low. So what's your point? Ain't that what life is?" And I'm
Oh,
like, I'm like, yeah, but that's the reality of it, right? You got to feel it.
Yeah.
right? The reality is that most of the time, which was an interesting point of dialogue for us, is most of the times once we feel a little bit of pain or something that's discomforting, we tend to move away from it so we don't have to
Mhm.
feel it again.
Right.
But the beauty of life is to feel it and embrace it again and again.
Yeah. So the book is broken up into four parts,
Yes,
right? You
yes.
have unrestricted, you have intimacy fences, other people's love, and fearless. Did you write the material before you broke it up into those four parts, or was it the opposite way? And what made you decide to break it up like that?
Okay,
And how did you decide what went where?
so um,
Was that
no.
too much?
Yes and no, Bill. Yes and no. So let me start by saying there was no particular order in which the poems were
Okay.
created. Right? There was
Okay.
it was just themes and feelings in the moment. Some of them came at 2 in the morning after I came from the bathroom. I just picked
Okay.
the phone up and just started texting. And then some of them came like back to back to back at 7 o'clock in the evening. So I think I would have to give most of the credit to the organization of the poems to my publisher
Okay.
because I think I ended up, I don't know, maybe it's a little over 100 poems in there or something like that. But she, I was bombarding her with so many emails. Um, I think there are like a total of 132 poems. Some of them she wanted to put in the book, and then they just kept coming. And so she was like, okay, we're going to stop right here.
Mhm.
And then we began to have a dialogue about, okay, so this looks like it fits under this category. Um, this looks like it fits here.
Mhm.
And for the most part, the four categories that were broken down, each poem pretty much fit underneath that. Now, ironically, the title of the book, Unrestricted, did not come until the end. And
Hmm.
at the end of the day, I ended up writing Unrestricted at the last minute, right before the
Oh,
book went to publishing, because
okay.
I had to, connect all of the thoughts of the book
Mhm.
underneath that one poem. And it was an interesting process. I learned a lot and loved it. So maybe I'm already working on some other stuff. So
Awesome.
mhm.
So I want to back up to your
Sure.
intention, which was
Yes.
to school your daughter, to share nuggets, jewels with her about
Right.
love and relationships.
Right.
Do you feel like you accomplished that goal?
I did. More
Okay.
importantly, the most important thing that I accomplished, Bill, was to have this conversation. Right.
Mhm.
M- my son, which he's 15, my daughter's 20. My son has been the carbon copy of me since he was born. So, like from the crib, I've been giving it to him raw. You know what I mean? Like just from the crib. I'm like, okay, you're a black man in America, right? You're going to accomplish whatever you choose to accomplish.
Yeah.
Let me lay down these rules, right? My daughter, on the other hand, has always been, at least from my perspective, um, the perfect complement of grace and optimism.
Okay.
Right? And so I felt like I would be derelict in my duties as a father if I didn't explain to her some of the game that's out here. Now, the most important part of the conversation for me was that it piqued her curiosity, and more importantly, Bill, the thing that I feel like I've seen over and over again in relationships that have failed from both men and from the side of women is
Mhm.
that it's allowing her to understand that healthy boundaries are acceptable and required in relationships.
Mm. Boundaries. I think I want to come back to that one.
Sure, sure,
Okay.
sure.
So you mentioned something in your book called intimacy. Am I saying that
Well,
correctly?
it's really pronounced intimacy, but you put the e
Intimacy.
instead of the I, right?
Okay. So can you explain that concept to me?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
the E stands for emotional intimacy. So the
Okay.
reality is that you know we are bombarded as Americans, as Black Americans, that whatever that follow TV. When I was young, it was BET. Now
Mhm.
you got all these other online videos. You got Instagram models. All of that talks about physical intimacy or
Mhm.
allows you to paint the picture of physical intimacy. But the reality is that the strongest part of a relationship is emotional intimacy. Now,
Mhm.
a lot of us struggle with emotional intimacy because there's so many different variables underneath of it. But the biggest variable is we struggle with living our truth, right? So
Mm,
emotional intimacy is the ability to connect emotionally and be intimate with your partner. And you know, generally speaking, I don't want to do a generalization, but generally speaking, as Black men, we're not prepared
okay.
properly for the engagement of a mental emotional intimacy. And then sometimes, to be fair to us, when we try, right, it's not responded to in a manner that's it's a creating a safe space for it to breathe and exist. So
Gotcha.
emotional intimacy is what keeps people together after physical intimacy is probably no longer an option, but because we lacked a lot of it in our relationships, um, you know, we peel to the left and we do different things.
Hmm. Okay. On page 21 in your book, under the title Bitter and Broken,
Sure.
you gave an what I thought was an honest, unfiltered assessment of yourself
Hmm.
and your failings,
Hmm.
uh, for lack of a better term, as a
Yeah.
husband. Was that
Yeah.
hard to write?
No.
No.
No, not at that point, right?
Okay.
Because you're standing back and you're looking down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking down and you're seeing, right, where you were strong and where you failed or where your weaknesses were, right? And I teach my son because he's a pretty good basketball player. I'm like, run to your weaknesses, right? But as an adult man, I didn't stop. I was just processing and doing and doing and doing. But the reality is that we all have weaknesses,
Yeah.
and if we don't embrace them, they'll kill us. So no, it wasn't hard at all. It was liberating, to be honest with
Mm. Did you discover anything about yourself that you didn't know while you were writing the book?
you. No question,
Yeah.
no question. Like I did not know until I wrote a poem, and I was doing some research on different types of connection and things of that nature. How how I ran, how I ran from emotional intimacy myself
Mhm.
because I had this feeling of I felt robbed or I felt mistreated. That's the
Mhm.
proper terminology. Early on, when I was 16 years old, and my first girlfriend. You know what I mean? I fell head over heels without any boundaries,
Mm.
and when I did that, I learned. Through the school of hard knocks
Mhm.
what pain felt like. And I was like, I ain't never feeling this again. So, and we have different ways as humans that we address those challenges, but I just shut mine off. I gave love, but I wasn't necessarily able and ready to take love from people.
Mm. Interesting.
Hmm.
So you just shared that you spent many years either unwilling or unable to be vulnerable in your romantic relationships after your
Hmm.
first heartbreak.
Hmm.
Um, what was your aha moment where you realized, okay, that's what I've been doing all this time?
I don't think, to be honest with you, Bill, I don't think it was a one moment thing for
Okay.
me. Um, if I look at my life, it's like a medley of a scatter plot diagram,
Mhm.
and I see different points. And I'm an economist by trade, so or at least one of the degrees is an economics degree. And so what we do is, they chart courses where you
Yeah.
you pick a line and you draw through it. And I think when I looked at myself, not anybody else that I was engaged with, when I looked at myself, I saw a number of things that I was like, maybe I could have done this different,
Mhm.
or maybe I should do it this way. Or more importantly, you know what? I did not know that I really don't like that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? which is really, and then which is the most fatal blow is like there are things that you don't like that you allow to happen, which
Mm,
which makes you feel which because you feel like you're doing the right thing because that's what love is. But the reality is that you're becoming more and more withdrawn, or some people become resentful, or you just get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna peel left. And that's again what I call us not living in our truth.
do you think that the inability to be vulnerable is a common theme amongst men? And why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think if I can be so bold, I think it's a common thing among men and women. I think primarily we aren't taught uh,
Mhm.
what the principles are. We spend resources and time and money on other things in life. We'll buy a Mercedes Benz. We'll buy, a $400,000 house, or we'll learn about what we need to do to manage and take care of that house, or we'll learn what types of oil and gas and all of the types of things that need to be to go into that 70 to $100,000 vehicle. But the one thing is the most important element of what it is we live for, which is to find our soulmate or soulmates, however you run into. We don't spend any time learning about that. And I think we do ourselves a grave disservice by one allowing the television to help dictate that television
Yeah.
or the internet at this point to dictate that, and then two, we allow these snippets that we see from our parents
Mhm.
to dictate what love looks like. Now, again, I'm not saying that it's bad. I stayed in a home with two parents, and yeah, they love each other. But again, they only showed me a a tiny piece of what emotional intimacy looked like. You know what I mean? I went in the bedroom with them at 2 in the morning when the conversations was everything else was going on. You know what I'm saying? So like, you really don't, you can't, you can. I talked to this guy that was a therapist one time, and he said everybody does the best with what they have. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So if you don't know what it looks like, or the structure or a healthy relationship looks like, and you don't seek it out to learn about it, how can you create it?
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, we have our own baggage that we either ignore, or we just plow through. And neither one of those are good things when it comes to creating a vulnerable or intimate moment amongst each other.
So based on what you just said, you definitely believe that your relationship with your parents affects your ability to be vulnerable or not within a relationship. Do you think that one relationship holds greater weight, um,
As
or
it
greater
relates,
potential to negatively impact a man's ability to be vulnerable in relationship? Mother son, father son. Do you feel like one of those is heavier or holds more weight or is more important into the shaping of, men's ability to be vulnerable within a romantic relationship?
I, I, I would say, from my gut, I
Mhm.
would say yes, right? I
Mhm.
would say yes. I think what helped me a lot was seeing my father, right, um, from time to time shed a tear, right?
Mhm.
But he held everything else down, right? Even if, the thing that I think about when it comes to us as parents that is incredible to me is like in the Wiz, right, or the Wizard of Oz, whichever one you choose. Um, Everybody believed that there was this great Oz that
Mhm.
controlled all of what the their land was governed by,
Mhm.
and he was magical and mystical.
Mhm.
But when you got there, you pull the curtain back. There was a man with pulling all the strings with his feet, his hands, and everything. And I
Right.
believe, that's what happens to a lot of us men, fathers. We are behind the scenes. We're fighting the negative persona that's projected out there as it relates to us. We're fighting to, maintain a job in a world that deals with racism in a way that we're forced to ignore it, just so we can get the check. And then we come home, and oftentimes we have struggles internally there. And some of us aren't the best communicators. So it's like I did my 8 hours. let me catch my break, look at this TV, watch this football game, and I don't want to be stressed.
Hmm.
So I do feel like watching my father manage all of those things as the man of the house, and then from time to time watching him to be vulnerable with me in certain scenarios helped me to plant the seeds that really just germinated at the age of 50 or at the age of 45.
Hmm. Hmm. There is an interview that's out there. I don't know if you've seen it. It
Hmm.
is Nikki Giovanni and Mr. Baldwin. And
Okay.
they're having a conversation about the tension between men and women at home. And
Mhm.
Nikki Giovanni basically said, extend to me the courtesies that you extend to the world. Lie to me. And so there
Mm.
was this great debate about what happens when men come home and how they decompress and
Mhm.
how the women in their lives often feel the brunt of everything that they could not express when they were out in the world. And
Mm.
so her position was, you extend those courtesies to your boss, you're kind to your boss, come home and do those same things to me. And so I thought, if you haven't seen it, I think you should
Mhm.
check it out. It was an amazing interview. I didn't agree with
Sure,
everything that either said, but it was
sure,
definitely an interesting conversation.
sure.
And us talking about vulnerability and you mentioning, how coming home and needing to decompress, and maybe me as a woman, I don't understand that. I want to talk about my day. I
Yeah.
want to talk about I want to talk about the kids. I want to talk about what
Right,
happened to me,
right,
and you just want to watch the game. And
right,
so there's a
right,
shutdown that happens, and
right,
it's becomes cyclical. And before
right.
you know it, you're strangers. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think,
So,
yeah, it's incredible. Let me
hmm
just take a 2 seconds to jump on that right quick. I
hmm
think I think I think in all of my conversations, right, the lie to me thing is really not an example of what I'm suggesting, right? I think
right,
I think what can happen is that it's not oftentimes what you say, is more often how you say it,
yeah,
right? So like um, men, for example, right, sometimes would like women to be with them in their space, but not on top of them, right? But they don't
yeah,
they don't say it well. Like so, if
hmm
I'm watching the ball game, right, for me, what's intimacy, or for some men, what's intimate, is that if I'm sitting in my sofa on my sofa,
hmm
you sitting beside me reading your book or playing Scrabble or whatever it is you do, right,
hmm
and just in my space, I'm present.
yeah,
Um, um, I do understand, which is true. Women are more vocal, right? They're
hmm
more expressive. They're more, yeah. Let me tell you about the day. And the truth is that 90% of us is like, okay, what is the bottom line, and how can I help? How can I help fix it so you can be happy, right? That's
and stop
basically
talking.
well, not to stop talking per se, right? But the details aren't as important to us as what is it that we can do to help make you feel better, right? Like
Yeah.
as a man, we are problem solvers by nature, which is
hmm
nothing new. But a lot of times the conversation gets lost because I'm looking for, or as a man, we're looking for the bottom line so we can solve it and move on to the next topic of conversation, where sometimes the conversation is the answer for ladies. Um,
hmm
and I do think that there's some time that when you start talking about principles of emotional intimacy, that the way you communicate is a foundational pillar to that.
Yeah, and another thing I think both sides suffer areas that both sides suffer in, and I know I have in the past, not so much
Hmm.
now,
Hmm.
but just not having the language. So there's all these videos and sermons and literature on women, on how to placate, your man when he comes home, and how to create as you said, a safe space for him to thus and so. And for me, I'm kind of like, okay, that's great. We need to know that as women, but how about tell men or teach men how to use the language to communicate to us what it is you need
Absolutely.
in that moment? Like,
Absolutely.
so if you're tired and you've had a hard day, what's wrong with saying that? Why can't you
Right.
say, hey, babe, I had a rough day today. Give me 30 minutes. Give me an hour. Can we talk in 20? Instead of, an attitude because I want to hug on you and kiss on you and tell you about my day. And so I just think, both sides could do
Absolutely.
better you know,
Absolutely, Bill. Absolutely.
in those moments.
And Bill, just being honest with you, like real talk is like sometimes we don't know. Like, and
Hmm.
then sometimes, we just buttholes. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's real talk. Like, some days I just don't feel the energy for that,
Yeah,
right? And it should be okay, right?
yeah,
Because there are other days when I should be like, okay, Belle, tell me what's going
yeah.
on.
You're
Tell me,
on it.
girl. Right?
Yeah.
But it should be okay, right? We
Yeah.
shouldn't. The problem is what happens is that on the days when I don't have the energy or you don't have the energy, then one of us might become bitter. Then
Mhm.
comes resentment. Then comes turmoil, right? And the reality is that we all should be able to be allowed to be humans.
Yeah.
Because I just don't. We're not always going to be on point every day.
Mhm.
But I do feel like, one of the things we could work to be better at is communicating. Like, babe, I just don't feel it today. I had a terrible day. And then
Mhm.
we ain't always going to tell you about our days because we like telling her ain't going to fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes you guys shouldn't take offense from that
Mhm.
because it's just how we're wired. Like, I'm bringing something to you for a fix
Mhm.
until I get to the point where I can feel like I'm not going to be judged if I say
Mhm.
something about that puts me into a weak spot, or I can say some stuff without feeling the tension that I'm going to have being vulnerable because it
Mhm.
takes a lot of energy. Because so once you do it, then you're putting yourself out there in a space where you can be chopped to shreds. And even if the woman doesn't chop you to shreds, you might become irritated that you've stepped out into a space that's uncomfortable for you. Does that make sense, Bill?
It does. And a lot of it is just knowing your partner and paying attention. Sometimes we get into the routine of doing things and we're just not paying attention. So as your partner, when you come home and I see that you're tense, I should stop and pay attention to that and not try to force, what it is I want to happen, which is have a conversation about something else. And part of that should be me knowing my partner and understanding body language and mood and temperament and all those things, and just stopping and putting myself on the back burner in that moment and giving you the space to do whatever it is you need to do so that when we come back together, we can have some healthy communication. Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
then some of us, like Bill, I can tell you in the both eye, we both we pay attention to nonverbal cues.
Hmm.
Some people aren't as astute to nonverbal cues. And so when their partner gives the nonverbal,
Hmm.
sometimes it's perceived as what's wrong with me, what I do. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then if they're thinking if I'm coming in mad because my boss told me to spend an extra 30 minutes today doing something for somebody else,
Mhm.
and I come in and I'm in my spot and I'm in my way and I'm trying to downsize and be somebody, get into a good zone, and my partner perceives it because she made scrambled eggs that were burnt this morning that I still feel some kind of way about that. There's going to be some conflict there that doesn't need to exist, right? but
Yeah.
but both of us bear the responsibility there because right, as a man, I didn't come in and say, you know what, I am pissed at my boss, give me like 20 minutes to get myself together, right?
Yeah.
I come in with a tube, throw my shoes down, go take a shower, come back, grab a beer and look at TV and shut you out.
Yeah.
And so, you know when you approach me, it could be wonderful or it could be explosive,
Yeah.
right? So it's all about even if you're not really astute at watching nonverbal cues of your partner, it's all about how you approach and what your insecurities are telling you as a
Yeah.
man and or a woman about what you're feeling, and then grasping those and managing them.
Yeah. So, a little while ago, you talked about safe spaces.
hmm
How can women create safe spaces for men to feel um, vulnerable? Like, what can we do?
I think that's a great question. I think there are a couple of things.
Okay.
One is let's realize from the jump that society helped us to become tight cocoons where we, just keep everything balled up into a knot, or either we explode like a shaking soda can and everything is everywhere, right? So we don't necessarily have, and again, this is not a generalization. These are just general conversations, right? We don't necessarily have governors where we can be like, let the pressure ease out gently, right? So um, I do think a strong part of it is what you touched upon is being present and watching and learning and observing. And if that person seems irritable, don't necessarily default to a defensive posture or posture of insecurity. Try to figure out where he's coming from, what set him off, or what he's feeling. If he doesn't want to talk about that particular thing,
Mhm.
allow that to go for a while. Like, okay, that's cool. Let's talk about the pancakes I'm about to make. You want blueberries or strawberries in them? You know what I mean? Just try to find ways to be humorous.
Mhm.
I think one is, most of us have this inside of us that we don't know how to tap into, and when you do see just a inkling of it as a woman, I think it's very, 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 very important for you to nurture that and not
Mhm.
crush it, right? Which is a
Okay.
hard thing to do, because I'm asking you, right, who's probably been out all day working 9 hours, to come into the house
Mhm.
and put some energy towards overcoming these challenges to grow together, right? So
Okay.
it seems like, and then a lot of times, in fairness, Bill, it probably will be on the lady or the woman to help bring that or nurture that environment, because a lot of us don't know that we have it, because it either we shut down or we explode, right? And there we need to have a happy medium. Most of us, we keep it inside, bottled up. That's why we got high blood
Mhm.
pressure rates out of the through the ceiling. But creating the opportunity, nurturing it, creating a safe space where he can share his deepest, darkest fears,
Mhm.
and you not be judgmental or hold that against him in another argument or another conversation. Because if he does share that one time and then he hears it again 2 weeks later in a negative connotation, yeah, you probably won't hear that for a while.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I've experienced that. Um, so as a couple, what does vulnerability look like? Like, what does that look like in a partnership as a couple? What does being vulnerable with one another entail?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think it's living your truth, right?
Mhm.
Um, but first, I think it starts with the big bubble is creating the atmosphere for vulnerability, right?
Okay.
So when the kids go down, you can talk about, hey, so how you feeling about your mom? I know she's got a surgery coming on, or whatever, create an opportunity to dialogue about something that's important or close to his heart. Or if the kids are having a challenge, let's find a way to talk about it in a way where we're on the same side. We're not pitted against each other.
Mhm.
I think what the first thing that comes in creating a safe environment is living in your truth. I've said that before. Like, if you don't like something that someone does, you should say it in a nice way, right? If you don't like how it feels when something transpires, you should say it in a nice way, because what happens is what we think is
Mhm.
what love is accepting everything that people offer us.
Yeah.
And that's not love, right? That's not um, there's a difference between being an unconditional love, and then being a product of stupidity, right? We're not supposed to just accept everything that's put in front of us.
Okay.
Again, the key thing I told my daughter was creating a healthy boundary. So you
Mhm.
live in your truth,
Mhm.
you embrace your own weaknesses,
Okay.
and that's on you as a woman, Bill, and that's on me as a man, right? So,
Mhm.
like, I can't really tell you your weaknesses. And I think one of the first things that we talked about when we first discussed the book and the radio show was like you were impressed that I told my story. I didn't tell anybody else's story. I told mine.
Mhm.
And I think that is the most healing thing of all, is that if we embrace our weaknesses and we attack those with veracity, so that they become some level of a strength, then I can be vulnerable with you, right? But if I got a million insecurities and I'm not dealing with any of them, it's hard for me to be open, because when I'm gonna be open, I'm gonna hear it in a defensive posture and not in the spirit of love. And then the third thing I think, Belle, is practice. Practice
Mhm.
towards perfection. Like,
Mhm.
you know, my grandmama used to say, fake it till you make it, right? And I just think that's the truth, right? Is that we got to realize is that we've never been taught some of these principles. We've seen it on TV. We've never lived it. I think there's a difference, and we can talk about this at another time,
Mhm.
between hopelessly in love and hopefulness, hopeful love, right? So
Mhm.
you have to structure, find out where you find along the continuum, and then work towards making those relationship principles existent in your marriage or your relationship.
What would you tell your daughter if what she should look for as red flags when she's considering someone for a relationship?
Yeah, one of the major things I tell her to be on look for is somebody that's experiencing, like, 1 in 4
Mhm.
Americans, right, experience
Mhm.
some form of mental illness, right? And I'm
Mhm.
in the mental illness field, so
Yeah.
I understand, right, um, the importance, which is an ironic thing. I got my doctorate in public policy, but it's focused on the policy of mental illness. But I understand, as a man thinketh, so he is, right?
Mhm.
So if you are in a relationship with somebody who has active depression syndromes or symptoms, and I'm not even talking about, bipolar or schizophrenia or anything else. If you're in and they're not seeking help, or they're not willing to do the work to become a better version of themselves, whether depression or not, that's a key flag right there. Like, because what we often do is we ignore those flags, especially as young people, and we plow through them, and we like, I'm going to I'm going to help you overcome whatever illness or whatever ailment or whatever
Right.
insecurity you have. When in reality, I can't do that for you. You have to do that for yourself,
Mhm.
right? I'm responsible for being the best version of myself that I can be in this relationship, and you're responsible for being the best version of yourself. And so, if she finds somebody who's constantly looking at her or pointing different things out about her that she needs to work on,
Mhm.
that's another red flag.
Mhm.
Third thing is if they have levels of aggression, unless you want to see her daddy locked up, that's a
Mhm.
another flag. You know what I mean? There, I'm gonna be honest with you, Bill. I believe it was Maya Angelou that said, "If people show you who they are,
Believe.
believe it." And so, what we do, right, especially as young people, right, as young people, we plow through it. Now, as an old man at 50, right, I don't have any patience for it. So, like, it's like if I see an inkling of it, I'm like, oh no, oh no. So, but we have to strike a balance. You know what I mean? So, as a young person, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to show you what love is. I'm going to love you through this. I'm going to diminish. I'm going to be Superman. Realizing, not realizing, you're setting yourself up for massive failure. And
Yeah.
as an old man, you have to have a little bit more patience and be like, no, everybody is not this way just because A, B, and C was this way.
Yeah. Can I say though, say though, as a woman, that
Mhm,
society conditions us to have a very high tolerance for a lot of stuff
mhm.
that men would never be encouraged to accept.
Give me some examples.
So,
Give me some examples.
well, I kind of grew up believing that, if you're going to be with someone, you had to endure a certain level of, pain and angst. That's just a part of it. That proves you're so quote unquote the ride or die. There's just going to be expect pain. Expect pain.
Okay.
And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about previous situations that I may have found myself in, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, I knew right away, okay, something is not right here, something is
Mm-hmm.
not good,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I like this person,
Mm.
so I'm gonna
Right.
ignore,
Right.
the million red flags that
Right.
I'm seeing
Right.
because
Right.
I saw a glimmer of
Right.
something good, 3 days ago, and so I'm
Right.
going to latch onto that good thing and try to push through and make this person into, who I think he could be.
Right.
This whole potential thing, like we're conditioned
Right.
to, fall in love and be with someone's potential, which I'm not a fan of unless you're straight out of college or in high school, but a grown man of 50, you should already have I should already see your fruits.
You said the tree should be dropping fruits all left and right, right at
I
50,
should
right?
already see your fruits, brother. Sorry.
I got you.
But I mean,
Got
I just feel like women are conditioned, we really are conditioned to compete, and we're conditioned to endure.
you. Mm.
So if you call it quits, if at the
Yeah.
beginning you notice things that for whatever your non-negotiables are,
Right.
we're shamed a lot of times for even having them. You should be happy this guy's showing you attention. He's nice. He has, all those things we hear. And no one ever flat out said to me, just take whatever. But though that's the messaging that I took away
Right.
from it,
Right.
because
Right.
there was always this undercurrent
Right.
of, just work with him.
Right.
work with him, work
There are,
sacrifice
yeah.
myself for that. That's
Right.
not healthy.
Couple of things that I want to say there is that in the book, in the book, I talk about joy, pain, sunshine, and rain. Like at the end of the day, life is going to bring you all of it.
Yeah.
But I told my daughter, right, which I would tell anybody, is like, and I'm gonna tell my son the same thing. It's like, yo, if your life with this person is not
Mhm.
giving you joy and sunshine 5 days out of 7, you need to renegotiate or relook at your situation. If your pain and rain is most of your days with this person, you can do one of three things, bro. You can either change and readjust your expectation to create more joy for yourself along with them, or you can ask them if they love you enough to change theirs, or you can get the hell out. It's one of three situations right there. It's one of three options. I think the other thing too is that I'm often reminded when you were saying is that George Bush said one time, the second Bush, he was like, we have the soft bigotry of low expectations. And what I feel
Mm.
like I heard you saying is that you are set you've established low expectations, or you've been conditioned to think that you should have low expectations when you enter a relationship. And I
Yeah.
would tell you that as a man, I'm telling you that even though numbers may have what may be perceived as disadvantages, I'm saying as a woman, you guys set the tone. Like you set the level of expectation based on which I'm going to either choose to ascend or I'm going to peel left. The issue is what you said. Just being candid with you is that I like this guy. He got 10 million other issues here, but I like this guy. And so it's the ignoring of the issues that
Mm.
eventually will catch up with you.
Yeah.
And then here's another thing too, Bill. I'm gonna go ahead and say this. Everything we've also been told that everything that when we get into relationships, they're supposed to last a lifetime. It's indoctrinated into our mind. Now my grandparents stayed married 65 years, right? So much so, when my grandfather passed, my grandmother, gave up the ghost about 9, 10 months later. Um, I don't know that we're in this century, in this type of lifestyle that we have with information and opportunities to do and grow and do, that we're conditioned to be that way. Now it would be nice,
Mhm.
but we have to learn to grow together, instead of growing independently. And we have to have more dreams that are common and shared amongst us, than having individual dreams. But if I be honest with you, I don't think that society is constructed that way. We are in a capitalist society, which is a great thing, but it's about me getting my car, me getting my money, me making these ends work. It's not about us overall.
Do you feel like men are pressured by society to give up what they're happy, give up their happiness to maintain, a household and provide? Like, I feel like in one of our other conversations, I
Hmm.
heard you say, or
Hmm.
felt like you were saying that a lot of times men kind of give up on the happy part.
Right,
They have the
right,
wife, they have the house, they have the car, they have the things.
right,
The happiness is, I may or may not get that. And I have to
right,
learn how to be okay with that.
right.
Do you
And I think,
feel like that's
yeah, yes, I do.
common or okay?
Yeah, yes, I do. And I'm gonna tell. I don't know if he came up with this, but the
Hmm.
first person I've heard say this was Earthquake. And I feel like Earthquake said, when he was talking about one of his children's mothers, he
Yeah.
said, we had a come to Jesus meeting and we realized that we were all right together, but we weren't right for each other. Right.
Mm.
So that was heavy. Like, cause I was like,
Hmm.
wow, you know what I mean? Like, very rarely do I get comedians that be like, hit me with some like deep stuff. And I'm like, that's heavy. But I think what you got to be okay with, right, is you have to both be okay with being all right to make that work, right?
Hmm.
You can't have one person in there wanting to be right for each other and the other person working to be all right with the other person. I think you can be
Hmm.
happy, right? I think you can be happy and have peace and have a great relationship being all right together. That means accepting him and her for who they are instead of being the right person for ech other. You see what I'm saying? Because I don't know how much or how many relationships in his lifetime where you're gonna, equally fall in love with the other person, right? It's
Hmm.
always some imbalance, right? So I do feel like sometimes as a man, specifically as black men, we work hard to provide, we work hard to be the rock between our family and the world, and sometimes we lose our own individuality. Well, and I'll speak for myself. I know I did. And it was a choice. I threw myself into my children. When things were got a little tough, right? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna pour everything I got into them, out of fear, and then out of sometimes just being hurt. So I just think sometimes it's easier to lower your expectations as a man
Hmm.
too, just like you were talking about as a woman. It's easier to lower them. You know, some men, we'll talk about the physical part. Some men want to come home and jump your bones 5 days a week. I watched this show on Instagram. It's a cute little couple, and he asked his wife, "Why were you pressing me for monogamy and to get married when you didn't want to have sex with me 6 days a week like I wanted to?"
Hmm.
Right. And it was like a deep question. Like, I was like, that's a good
What did
question.
she say?
She said, I was not, and they've been married like 10 or 15 years. And she said, I was not equipped mentally to meet you where you were, to meet you where you were physically. Right. I
Hmm.
was I had gotten into this marriage and I was busy trying to get a career started. I was busy trying to create and manage a family. I was busy trying to do the things that I perceived were a happy, created a happy home. But I didn't know that you was going at 26 want to jump my bones 6 days a week. Right? It was a bit much. So, in that regard, you have a man then who's going to either do one or two things, right? He's going to try to redirect his energy into something else, or he's going to go release that tension in another way.
Mm.
And go ahead.
Okay. So okay. So
Oh, no,
I was
no,
gonna
wait.
say
Is
something,
that
but I'm not
pregnant?
gonna
Is that
say it.
is that pregnant? If it's pregnant, go ahead, say it. Go on, drop that child. Go
No,
on, drop the
I'll keep
child.
my mouth closed. Um, so, what advice do you give to men so they don't fall into a pattern of, denying themselves happiness within a relationship? Because I can think of, watching my father, who was always a provider,
Hmm.
always present. He and my mother divorced,
Hmm.
but the only emotions I ever remember him showing at that time were, that's where I get my sense of humor from. So he was always cracking jokes, or
Right.
he was angry. I
Right.
didn't see the happy part in there.
Right.
So, how do we teach men, or what do we tell men that they need to do so they can hold on to that? That should be a non-negotiable
It
for
should
men
be.
and women within a
It should be.
relationship. And
It
so
should be.
I don't know what is causing men to push that down, but what do you say to men so that they don't let go of that once they get into a relationship?
Yeah, Bill, I'm gonna be honest with you and keep it real. I'm like living in your truth is so very important,
Mhm,
right? Living in your truth is so very important. Like a lot of us don't know what peace looks like,
mhm,
um, or inner peace looks like. That's why we self medicate. That's why
mhm.
we do detrimental behaviors that cause conflict. It's because we don't have peace within, and we don't have peace from within because we're not living in our truth about who we are and what we want. And then when we express what we want, sometimes it may be denied. And this is a man and a woman. It may be denied, and then we don't know what to do with that energy, right? Because what happens is once you get denied, it's our nature to continue to avoid that because that denial, you know what I mean?
Hurts.
Oh
It
my
hurts.
goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Especially from somebody you love, right? I'll ask somebody I don't care about for $10 million, and keep asking until I get to somebody say, okay, I'll give you 1 million. If I've
Mhm,
asked 600 people to get to $1 million, I'm like, cool. But if I ask the woman or the man that I love for something and they deny me, that's that's painful.
yeah.
I mean, sometimes it can be irreparable.
Yeah. So what do you tell women so that they don't, because I'm sure there's some women who hadn't even really, who may be forcing a man to deny himself happiness, um, uh, or the things that will make him happy just so that he's providing and, going about his day doing the mechanical things that husbands, lovers, spouses do, whatever. What do you tell women who want to make sure that they're not doing that to their significant others? What
Right,
can they do to encourage him to
right,
find his happiness and hold on to that in the
right.
marriage or relationship?
Yeah, I think you have to start with the conversations about discomfort, right? Because
Mhm,
it's easier to, for somebody who don't know what makes them happy, right? Which is
mhm,
a lot of us, because we're
mhm,
not trained to seek that out, right? It's easier for us to start with the things that don't make us happy, but we don't want it to turn into a whining session, right? Right? But we want to do it in a structured manner in which you identify 10 to 15 things that are manageable on his
mhm,
part and on your part, and you try to create a structured plan to mitigate at least five of them, right?
mhm.
Because what happens is that at the end of the day, none of us can get everything we want in this lifetime. That's a flawed thinking, but you have to have some non-negotiables, right? And sometimes what we've been taught, right, is you the essence of love is to give up those things that make you who you are.
Mhm.
And that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard at 50, right? But at 26 and 27, I'm like, yes, I'm going to do this right.
Deny myself these things. Yeah.
Right. But just like, but this makes me who I am. This is
Yeah.
the essence of me. And we
Yeah.
don't live in our truth. And that's the
Mm,
key thing, Bill. We have to live in our truth.
mhm. Yeah. So let's talk about therapy. I
Hmm.
know that you're very big, and so am I, on the mental health piece because that's so
Hmm.
important.
Hmm.
And, I know for me growing up, that wasn't anything you talked about, the mental
Absolutely.
health. It just, if you went to a therapist, you're crazy.
Absolutely.
So therapy is cooler now,
Absolutely.
and I suggest that everyone get into therapy because
No question. Yeah,
therapy
because
is
we're all
wonderful.
damaged.
But
Absolutely.
do you think it's possible for men and women and couples to get to where they need to be without therapy? How important do you think that is uh,
I
as an
think
individual and
right,
as a couple?
right. I think the journey of self-exploration is the most important thing that we can do, Bill. I mean, like I can't help you be the best version of yourself if I'm not the best version of myself. And I think again, we do the best with what we have. If you know more, you do more, right?
Mhm.
So I think that individual therapy is good. I think couples therapy is good. I think that taking the time to get educated books that explore different communication patterns
Mhm.
about or explore paths to making you a better person or
Mhm.
finding out your weaknesses to kind of round those out instead of them being jagged edges and sharp and cutting. I think those are great things. I think the journey to self healing is the most important thing for me as a man to be the best version of a mate to you as a woman, as I would feel for you. Like I don't think that it's mandatory, but again, I do believe in therapy. I do believe in the principles connected to it. But as long as you're on a journey of self exploration and understanding, you'll get there.
Mhm. What if you have a spouse or a partner who's unwilling
To
to
to go
participate
to
in therapy? Yeah.
yeah, that oftentimes is the case, right?
Mhm.
Is that so? Then I one of the things that I'm going to be constant of is I'm always going to be honest, right? So then you become the best version of yourself, and if they don't grow and they get to the point where it's too much for you, and it feels like it's draining your soul, you individually have
Mhm.
a decision to make.
Mhm.
You I can't make anybody do anything in this lifetime. That's the fallacy of love, right? That's the
Mhm.
greatest fallacy, is that if I just love you a little bit more, if I just pour a little bit more into you, that you'll get to where I want you to be.
Yeah.
And that whole potential thing, or I'm going to make you be who I want you to be,
Mhm.
is the greatest lie of all. You need to deal with what you see,
Right.
not what you want to be. You know what I mean? And so if you can't get that person to get up off the inertia and move to in a
Mhm.
direction, then that's okay, right? You have to make a decision, and it's okay to restart. Like you're not a failure, right?
Mhm.
Because you restart, right?
Mhm.
In sports, you keep shooting your jumper until it goes in the hole. We keep shooting life and keep living life until you get what works. Like there's no failure in that.
Mhm.
Like you just have to be conscious of it, because what there is a failure is if you continue to sit there and you marinate on that thing, you become resentful with that thing, and then you become bitter with that thing, and then you die at 58 instead of living at 79 or 80, right? That's like it's sickening, right? It doesn't make sense, but we do that. We do that.
I don't know if it's arrogance or delusion, where you think that your love is enough to change another person. And, I can honestly say that, I know many men and women who feel like, my love is enough to make this marriage work. Me wanting it to work is enough. And you will exhaust yourself. Um,
Yeah, I think it's
because
both.
it takes two. Yeah, it takes
Right, but
two
Bill, I'm gonna tell
in
you,
a minute. Yeah.
it's society, right? It's
Yeah.
what we're taught, right? It's indoctrinated into. It's the craziest thing, because we have capitalism, and then we have this concept of my love will pull you through, right? You know what I mean? Capitalism is all about me, the individual, but then
Yeah.
you talk about love, and it's like, no, we give of ourselves until we have nothing, and
Yeah.
then it's supposed to be okay, but you're
Yeah.
going to be bitter. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's not a model, a coherent model. But I would tell you, the
Mhm.
first thing that I've told my daughter is do not try to make somebody into who you would want them to be. Embrace them for who they are, or keep it moving.
Yeah. One of the things that I talked to one of my girlfriends, and then we're going to take a look at some comments,
Okay.
is you really want to find someone who's already like you want them and want them to be and need them to be. You have to be okay with the fact that they might not change at all
Right.
once you get into relationship with them. And so if they're fine as they are, I think that's something worth exploring.
Right.
So, getting in my youth, I had this idea in my head where, you get into the relationship in hopes that they will change these
Right.
these things.
Right.
And my experience has been that they never do. Oftentimes it got worse.
Absolutely. But a lot of times, Bill, the truth is that a lot of times women or men may want a diamond and they have an emerald, right?
Yeah.
If you don't want the emerald, leave it alone. Don't try to
Yeah.
make it into a diamond. Leave it alone.
Or they want a diamond and they're petrified, poop. So I'm
Right.
kind of like,
Yeah, good point.
are you what you're seeking?
Good point,
And
Bill. Good point.
I think a lot of
That's
times
good, Bill.
we rush. Yeah, I think a lot of times we rush into relationships without due diligence. We haven't done our due diligence. We don't know this person. We don't really know,
Right.
what their life,
That's right.
what their worldview is, or what
Right.
love looks like to them. We just kind of rush in because they're
Right.
cute, or
Right.
he's
Right.
fine, has biceps and
Right.
triceps and
Right.
curly hair, and
Right.
and then you get in there, and then Georgia Power's calling you, and you can't pay a light bill with
Right. The cute
muscles,
hair. The
curly
cute
hair.
hair.
So, okay, so let's see what we have over here. Natasha Reed says, absolutely, so many struggle with emotional intimacy. Tashana says, I agree, Natasha. We must stand in our truth and be good with telling someone else what we need and desire. Misha says, great conversation. Tangela says, great analogy with the whiz and the and Oz. Misha says, facts. TKL says, let's talk about it. Shamika says, so true, because we as women think we can fix or change the person. Naima says, it's unfair to expect our partners to do the things for us that we aren't committed to doing for ourselves consistently. Tashana says, it's not our job to fix the other person. And I absolutely agree with that. It's
Right.
their job to do the work so that they're
That's what
showing
I'm
up
telling you.
as their best self. And I believe if
Absolutely.
they're unwilling to do that, then you need to, as you say, peel to the left,
That's right.
leave skid marks in the parking lot,
And keep it moving.
whatever it is. And where
And
can
keep
we
it moving.
find you? Where can we find you on social media, Dr.
Okay.
Dennis?
I've got a couple of different platforms. I am on Instagram. I'm looking for my little paper here so I don't tell no lies
I
here.
got you. It's on the
Um,
screen.
okay, beautiful. Thank you for helping me out. So
Mhm,
I've got on Twitter, I'm Dr. Dennis Parker.
mhm,
At Dr. Dennis Parker. On
mhm,
IG, I'm at Dr. Dennis Parker. On my website is www.drdpinspires.com.
mhm,
I'm gonna
mhm.
repeat all of them again. My website is www.drdpinspires.com. My Twitter is at Dr. Dennis Parker. And my IG is at Dr. Dennis Parker as well. And if you reach out to me in any of those, inbox me in any of those forums, I'll be happy to, try to get you with my publicist to help create an opportunity for me to come out and speak, or send you one or both of the books if you want to purchase them. I'm
Yeah.
excited about just getting out and
It's a
sharing
great
some of my
read.
thoughts.
It's a great read,
Thank
and
you,
it's a
man.
conversation we probably need to do a part two at
Sure, I'm here. Let
some
me know.
point, because there are some things we didn't touch on that I
That's
wanted,
wonderful.
just the
Okay.
time got away from
Okay.
us.
Okay.
Um, did you have any final thoughts for those watching?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of leave with every couple
Mhm,
can increase the intensity of their emotional, intimate experience by creating an atmosphere of vulnerability,
mhm.
living in their truth, embracing their weaknesses, and practicing towards perfection. If you miss one of those four, peel left. Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for tuning into Conversations with Belle. You can find me on all social media platforms. I am Belle Morgan on Twitter, IG, and YouTube. And my website is www.bellemorgan.com. I look forward to seeing everyone again as soon as we can, so that we can continue to discuss real life issues in a meaningful way. Until then, have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.